This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
It is interesting to see all the love for maps.
Joe Manganiello with Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss.
What's that on that baloney?
The 2024 5e books are off to the strongest ever start.
D&D sucks. Everything sucks. But I guess it sucks less now.
With Jess Lanzillo out and Dan Ayub in, I feel like I don't know what to expect from Wizards right now.
All of that and more, if you believe it, right now.
Good evening. The following stories you may find to be disturbing and unnatural in nature. They are stories of individuals gathering together in a cult-like capacity to tell stories of fantastical demons and eldritch horrors among themselves. My name is Ben Byrne. I am your guide through these tales this evening. And I am joined, as always, by characters and creatures most bizarre. Shawn Merwin, James Hake, Dael Kingsmill. Dael, who have you dressed as for Halloween this year?
Wouldn't you like to know?
Very well. We shall maintain the mystery. James Hake, who are you dressed as for Halloween this year?
I'm dressed as famed galactic bounty hunter Samus Aran.
Very
We're
good.
using
And
dressed as in a very loose capacity today.
by every measure you know, I am dressed as.
hey, digital costumes are costumes. You know, go
That's true. That's
see
true.
Andy
That's
Serkis
true.
do a TED Talk. Sean, you've forgotten your Halloween costume. What's...
Exactly. I forgot that we were doing a Halloween episode this year. So I am just my typical conspiracy theorist self. And I have a D&D hat on under this. So I'm a D&D conspiracy theorist at that.
Right. So you watch D&D YouTube videos, I see.
Exactly. I am there for the clickbait, my friend. It's all
Right.
true, every single bit of it.
You heard it here. Like and subscribe. Speaking of paranoia, how do we feel about social deduction games, particularly ones that kind of prey upon paranoia, friendships, betrayal, games like the ever spooky werewolf or the Resistance? You know, how do we feel about that? Do we enjoy those games?
I love those games until I feel like it gets really stressful if it's implemented within another game. So like one of my favorite games of all time is Dead of Winter, another spooky game about zombies. And it's got a sort of social deduction traitor element to it, which works great, really fun. But I usually don't play it because it makes it very stressful.
Sure. Because correct me, I've played Dead of Winter, but not for a very long time. And that betrayer mechanic is only a maybe. You kind of randomly shuffle it into like character cards or something.
Which is true of things like One Night Ultimate Werewolf as well. Like there are variations of the werewolf format in which there may not actually be a werewolf.
Yeah. Betrayal at House on the Hill Legacy is also very good at using those sort of social deduction.
Oh, Ben.
That session 0 of Betrayal Legacy.
Yeah, I don't want to give it away, but it's very, very, very good.
Y'all, I received a secondhand copy of Betrayal Legacy that it had one session played, and it broke my heart.
Well, that's actually fun because we have a copy of it with, I think, 2 sessions played. And then we just hadn't played it since, and I feel like we can't go back to it now because those sessions have been played. Shawn, how do you feel about these sort of social deduction mechanics?
I think they're fine. I had fun playing several of the games mentioned. I don't tend to go for them, mostly because of time and number of... You normally need 6, 7, 8 people to play them to get the full feeling. So finding that many people available to play, especially a legacy game, is not easy. But I enjoy them. I'm terrible at them, but I enjoy playing them.
Shawn, I gotta sympathize with you here because I love social deduction games, but one of my best friends hates them. And so if I'm getting a group of like 6 to 10 people together, I know who I'm going to invite, and unfortunately, they're not going to have a good time, and so I tend not to play them.
I do find they're very divisive for some folks who just find the the sense of paranoia, but also the sense of betrayal and kind of the way that these games, you know, the joke being that they ruin friendships. But I suppose some people don't enjoy that feeling of like your best friends betraying you over the course of a game, despite the fact that it's intended to be all in good fun. Speaking of fun, but also spooky costumes. Ooh. I have to ask, have we made it now? Is nerd culture mainstream? Because Critical Role now has 2 Spirit Halloween costumes. That's right. If you've got a Halloween party coming up, you could go dressed as Jester Lavore or Molly Mock Tea Leaf, thanks to Spirit Halloween. Is this like a cultural touchstone in the US? That's my sense.
Oh yeah, Spirit Halloween, big cultural touchstone.
I gotta say, I think this is much closer to feeling like a step into the mainstream than any of the other things we have ever talked about being a step into the mainstream. Because It's kind of like, I don't know, the day I was watching an Arashi concert and I realized that I had enough subscribers that I could technically fill the Kokoritsu, I was like, oh, okay, maybe numbers mean nothing to me, actually. Because that's a huge number of people, but it just feels blurry and it's kind of, and when someone buys out a stadium and then hopes to fill the seats, it's kind of like, you know, it means less to me than a specific individual person being able to buy that costume. It's not just for the cosplayers anymore. It's the democratization of Critical Role cosplay. That was a joke. But, you know, I think that this is far more telling than any of the other things have ever been. That's a really bold statement.
Teos and I have the D&D baloney scale. There was branded Dungeons and Dragons baloney in Spain years ago. And so if you're walking through the grocery store, you know, any random person and going, what's that on that baloney? You've reached that level. And I think this counts. This counts because Spirit of Halloween is huge in the US. People, you know, these stores pop up starting, you know, beginning of September, end of August, and suddenly they're everywhere. And you say, I'm never going to set foot in there. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, I need a costume. So you go in. and so, you know, you may see people asking, what the hell's that? But at least they're interacting with it. So, yeah, I think we've reached that mark.
Does Spirit Halloween spend the rest of the year becoming like Spirit Summer, Spirit Valentine's? Spirit.
They go the way of all good capitalist enterprises. They fold, and then they reappear magically. At least around here, I can't speak to the rest of the country, but around here, it's in a different old store every year too. So if I go downtown, one year it'll be in this abandoned building, and then the next year it'll be in this building where our business just went out.
Timeshare with all the other holidays.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the meme of Spirit Halloween, is that as soon as any other big box store goes out of business, their corpse is immediately picked clean by a Spirit Halloween.
Wait, I saw this meme recently. It was the White House with the Spirit Halloween banner. I remember.
Exactly. Yeah, so as soon as a Staples or a Circuit City or something goes out of business, you can bet your bottom dollar that come Halloween time, there'll be a Spirit Halloween banner over it.
Is 150 USD expensive for a Spirit Halloween costume? Because that...
Yes.
Yeah.
Says the man who just made one for 43 cents.
Very good. Well, speaking of things in America and the concept of time, next week we will be recording the Lorecast an hour earlier in the US due to time zones changing. This is mostly to let folks on Twitch know who come and see us live. It will now be 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time as of next week's recording, and it will continue that way for the next 6 months until daylight savings swap back again, or until further notice, basically. So don't log on an hour late next week because we'll already be done, or we'll be running overtime like usual, one or the other. So you might get a little bit of an episode. Who knows? That's the housekeeping taken care of. But unfortunately, there has been a death. Dun, 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 dun.
Hey, Dante, insert lightning. Yay.
Sigil The 3D virtual tabletop that has been worked on by Wizards of the Coast for the past few years is officially being laid to rest in the cold earth. Folks might remember earlier in the year, I think it was sort of February, March, Sigil was basically taken off active development. They reduced the team down. They laid off most of the staff and reduced it down to a skeleton team who were basically just keeping it going. Wizards of the Coast have since decided, unfortunately, that they will take the servers for Sigil offline entirely. Their statements basically seeming to suggest that they feel the service is not pulling in enough new subscribers from D&D Beyond. Not enough people are using it for the cost of keeping it up. How do we feel? Is anybody surprised? Is anybody like, oh no?
No, the writing was on the wall. It's like we knew this a while ago. But
this conspiracy.
Yes! Yes!
No, I mean, what more is there to say? It's sad that the program didn't do well. People lost their jobs. A lot of hard work kind of went down the drain.
A lot of passion.
But ultimately, I think it's good to pull the plug than kind of try and keep the thing on life support. It would not, it's not going to make a miraculous recovery, unfortunately.
It is, speaking of spooky things, staying online until Halloween next year.
That's undead.
They're keeping it undead. Yeah, exactly. Undead until next year. So if you're still using Sigil and you've got a campaign currently running using that service, you have until October 2026 until it will be taken offline entirely, and you will not be able to access anything that you have made within Sigil. So it's good that they're keeping it running for at least a year for those that were using it. And as another make good to the community, folks who have been using Sigil even once between March 1st of this year, 2025, and October 23rd of this year, 2025, so you can't run out and try and use it now. But if you used it between those two dates, March 1st and October 23rd, you will receive a 6-month credit to your D&D Beyond Master Tier subscription. I suppose as a thank you, but also as recompense for any purchases or things that you might have made through Sigil. And folks who pre-ordered the 2024 physical/digital core book bundle for the 2024 5e rules, remembering it came with a golden dragon statue that was a reward in Sigil. Anybody who got that statue will be given a set of digital dice in D&D Beyond as an alternative
they better
gift.
be some pretty cool. Nice. Sorry, Dante.
Because you were impressed by the dragon, or?
Well, just because I think the people who ordered that thing were excited by that thing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, so if you're going to give them something that is drastically different, you better make it really freaking cool.
The dice are made from the dragon, I bet.
Oh. Is that a conspiracy?
Yeah, I think that's true. I can't imagine it being any other way.
Character sheets, the background for the character sheet, there will also be a unique one provided for all D&D Beyond users. So that's cool. They're trying to make gestures of goodwill to folks who engaged in and enjoyed Sigil.
It is interesting to see all the love for maps in the comments on this particular announcement post. Maps, of course, the software, the program, the thing that you can use, not just maps in general, not just cartography fans, lighten up the comment section. But no, it's and you know what else is great about maps, as I sit and think about this over the coffin of Sigil, is you know how to say it. You know what it is. You're like, what's that thing with the maps? Oh, it's maps. You don't have to remember what magic word they've applied to this particular program. You don't have to wonder, is it Sigil or Sigil? You don't have to end up in that old debate.
That was the worst bit of Sigil, whatever, It wasn't the fact you needed a gaming PC. It wasn't the fact that everybody playing D&D is now looking at a screen. It wasn't the fact that there was barely any miniature support in it. It was the fact that you didn't know if it was called Sigil or Sigil.
Yeah.
Worth noting, Maps is entirely unaffected by this. If anybody had any queries about that, they will continue with Maps. Is the thumbnail for this week the Flash tombstone meme with like Maps
it's gotta be
doing the bunny rabbit ears over Sigil's tombstone? Is that
nice? Love.
And speaking of spooky things, if you love spooky eldritch horror campaigns, then let me tell you about Dungeons of Drakkenheim Daggerheart. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Monty and Kelly. We're also going to touch on it, I think, in more detail next week. But it's worth going and following the Kickstarter. I've just posted a link in the Twitch chat right now. It'll be down in the bit place thing in the spooky comment section if you're watching this on YouTube. Because if you follow along, we have follower stretch goals for that, meaning that currently I think we're on about 3,000 followers, which means that we have unlocked 2 miniatures of Drakenforce, who are the player characters from Drakkenheim played in the original live play campaign. And those aren't just STLs. If you digitally back the Kickstarter, you get the STL. But if you make a physical pledge, and this is what I love, because I don't like STLs, because I don't have a 3D printer, you get a physical mini. And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, sorry, Dante.
We will not rug pull you with a digital mini. You will get a physical miniature with your product.
There's something so funny about you saying that when we can only see one of your eyes.
Trust me.
Okay. Shawn, do you trust him?
I do not. I do not trust any of you. You are all very suspect. See, suspect is the old way of saying sus.
Right, yes, of course. Well, you know what you can trust is the fact that if we get enough followers to unlock all 3 minis, everybody will get those minis for free, STL if it's a digital pledge, or the physical mini if it's a physical pledge. Even if you're not decided whether to back the Kickstarter or not, you can go follow it just to help other people unlock those miniatures. You know, we're all in it together. It's not a conspiracy, Shawn, I swear.
Well, you didn't tell us when it launches, so I don't believe you.
It launches next week on November 4th is when the crowdfund officially goes live.
On Election Day, conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
Election Day for
Trying
what?
to keep people away from the polls. I get you. I get what you Australians are doing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a little accuser. Man, did it just get hot in here?
Look.
Seems like it needs investigating. But speaking of spooky horror and resurrections and things coming back from the dead, Joe Manganiello has been photographed with Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss and Dan Ayub, the head of D&D, in the Wizards of the Coast head office. There have been several posts to social media from among that group of people suggesting that something Dragonlance themed is on the way. What could it be? Shawn, do you have any conspiracy theories about this?
The funniest thing is that this was in the works, supposedly, if we believe Joe Manganiello from before, saying that he'd written scripts, he had done a lot of work, and then things took a bad turn in February of 2024 when essentially it must have been shut down because Mr. Manganiello went online and said that Wizards, he didn't say exactly this, but I could imply it from reading his thoughts. The Wizard sucks, 2024, D&D sucks, everything sucks, but I guess it sucks less now.
Yeah, I had to go back because we talked about this on the Lorecast. I thought it was February this year. It was February almost 2 years ago now where Joe Manganiello. Yeah, right.
Yep.
He had spoken about wanting to get a Dragonlance TV show off the ground and had gotten it through development, but had said, and I'm paraphrasing, but what he literally said was something to the effect of, Wizards of the Coast are simply not interested in developing anything for Dragonlance at this time. Well, 2 years later, at this time, apparently they are. To be clear, though, it's not clear whether this is Joe Manganiello's TV show being resurrected or whether this is potentially like an adventure module or another setting guide for 5e 2024 or all of those things. Nothing has actually been announced yet. They're just kind of teasing us. Who's a fan of Dragonlance here? Who feels teased?
I like Dragonlance. I've read the books. I enjoyed them. I think they're books of their time, but I think they're kind of ahead of their time, if that makes any sense. I would watch a Dragonlance TV show. No, I'm not leaping out of my seat. I think the community response to 5e Dragonlance has been a bit cool. The War of the Dragon Queen adventure was met with mixed reception. The Dragonlance part of the Vecna adventure was met with mixed reception. But on the whole, I think the setting of Dragonlance is really cool. I think a war against dragons is a very iconic image, and I think D&D would be wise not to leave that on the table, especially if they've got a passionate super fan in the building ready to make it happen.
Do we know why Dragonlance has been received so lukewarm? Because they did, obviously, the adventure modules back in 2022. And I know folks who were Dragonlance fans were excited for it. And Dante and I went and watched the cinematic trailer for it that they did. And we're like, this is a pretty cool cinematic trailer. I mean, cinematic trailer is not indicative of the quality of the book, but...
The issue from way back during its inception was there were these really popular novels that did a great job of capturing D&D in novelization form.
Sure.
And then the adventures came out, and the adventures were play the story that you've already read. And that's a little awkward. That is one of the worst things that you can do to really invest in D&D fans is basically give them a spoiled plot. So as cherished as the setting might be, it's not always been seen that way as a role-playing game setting, more as a fiction setting.
The real issue with 5e Dragonlance is that by what they published, there's a fan perception that the people writing Dragonlance at Wizards don't really get Dragonlance. And it was just mentioned in chat, but one of the main little bugaboos is that there are no werewolves on Krynn, the Dragonlance setting, and the Vecna adventure had you fighting werewolves on Krynn, which is like, to me, it's a minor mistake, right? Like, it's not like you've got the main villains and heroes all muddled up, but it's indicative of whoever's writing it doesn't really know the setting. And so it becomes a real focal point for ire.
That is a bugaboo for me, to borrow a phrase, because I feel like it's very easy with tabletop role-playing games, and we've maybe had this discussion before, but maybe it's worth cracking into it again, is like the fidelity and I want a different word, but nothing else is jumping to mind, so I'm going to use sanctity of a setting versus kind of the kitchen sink that tabletop role-playing games tends to be, right? And I am a big fan of really, at least from like whatever people do at their own tables is up to them. If a GM wants to throw in werewolves to their Krynn campaign, all the power to them, and they should absolutely have the ability to do that. But if you are writing for the setting, if you are publishing for the setting, I think it is imperative that you understand what the setting is trying to accomplish thematically and why its world building is constructed in a certain way, and maintain those rules, because it creates a sense that this setting is real and not just a dumping ground for every fantasy trope that somebody can think of.
And I think that's why people, I think, are reasonably excited about having someone who is a super fan of Dragonlance back in the building. I'm very neutral on Joe Manganiello, but if he's a big fan of Dragonlance and he knows what's what about Dragonlance, then I think Dragonlance fans should be reasonably excited for him to be around.
Not to mention the original two authors.
Yeah. Seriously, I should have mentioned them first.
I would like to, at this time, on the subject of bugaboos, mention here's a shout out to my university lecturer who forgot the word pet peeve one time. And he said, I have a hobgoblin, a bête noire, a thing that pisses me off.
Was your professor French? Was this
Well, no, but he spoke French, and he used every opportunity to make sure that people knew that he spoke French.
Bête noire.
That's to most people who speak French. Cool. I mean, I'd be excited for a Dragonlance thing. Do we have a preference, or do we have a prediction? Obviously, we don't know, but whether this is going to be a TV show or a rule book for the game, or both at the same time, because they have talked about how they want to, improve their ability. Wizards want to improve their ability to be able to kind of sync up their products across multimedia platforms.
With Jess Lanzillo out and Dan Ayub in, I feel like I don't know what to expect from Wizards right now. You know, their style seems to have had something of a transformation. Not their style, but their leadership's had a real transformation. And so if they're going to be full force media tie-in, then yes. But I'm not sure if Dan has shown to us yet that that's his sort of brand directorial style yet.
Chris Cox, the CEO of Hasbro, did a investor call recently for the third quarter of 2025. And he mentioned offhand that there were something like 40 or 50 D&D, I think, or maybe it was just Hasbro related shows, other things in the works. And
Sure.
D&D was something that we would know more about some of these secondary products within the next 2 quarters. So within the next 6 months, we should be hearing about some of these projects. And maybe this was just a preview of one of them.
Well, that's exciting. We'll have plenty to talk about on the Lorecast over the next 6 months.
Maybe just Wizards should set their sights a little smaller when it comes to the entertainment space for a bit. Make a web series, make a webtoon or something instead of trying to make a full-on massive production.
I feel like that ground's pretty well trodden at this point by the community, though, right?
But they've let it lie for a long time. Everyone's
Very
doing
well.
actual plays right now, except Deerstalker, I guess.
Except Deerstalker, that is true. There's an actually scripted actual play in theory. Viva La Dirt League as well.
Viva
They
La
also
Dirt
do
League,
kind of
yeah.
scripted, gags.
But where are the North Americans, huh? Where are they?
I
Well,
want
the
Wizards,
Pacific is claiming it.
Halloween.
I want Wizards to actually get Deerstalker on their bankroll. Have they never officially partnered before? What's his name? The guy who I see on Insta Reels all the time. The guy who loves Rome. What's his name? He's Pat.
Yeah.
Yes, I've never met him in person. He's Aussie, right? He's down there.
Yeah. He's great. Love Pat.
I love his stuff. I'd love to see him doing something official Wizards instead of doing something D&D or Baldur's Gate fan made. They should leap on that.
Well, speaking of leaping on things, we're going to leap on to the next piece of news, which is the spookiest of them all. Capitalism.
Oh, no.
As Shawn touched on a moment ago, there was a third quarter investor call for Hasbro, which Chris Cox, the CEO of Hasbro, spoke on very briefly giving D&D a couple of mentions. First of all, suggesting that the 2024 5e books are off to the strongest ever start for D&D books, which is, I feel, a recurring theme that we've been hearing from them when it comes to the D&D core books, the launch of the new 0.5 version of the rules. Cox also alluding to that D&D Beyond Maps, which we mentioned earlier, has driven up weekly traffic by nearly 50% since its September launch.
The people love maps. Oh, yeah, the quotes around launch.
Yes. If you're like, wait a minute, Maps only launched in September?
Through the mists.
I'm so young. You're not. Maps has been out for a while now. It's just been in beta until September. And I think at that point they made it free for everyone. I tried to go back to our previous Lorecast episode. I couldn't find it, but they made it free for everyone to be able to access whether you had a subscription or not to D&D Beyond. So that's good for D&D.
It's absolutely good for D&D. It's the opposite of Sigil, right?
Yeah.
Sigil was, we're going to build this incredible thing, but we have no idea why, or if anyone's going to use it, or how they're going to use it, or how we're going to monetize it. Maps was, we've got this little thing here. Let's just show some people. Oh, look, people are actually using it. Let's get more people to use it. Oh, how can we get more people to use it? Let's give it away. And that has actually worked. That slow, steady, measure twice, cut once approach is actually working. And so now what we can see, now the experiment will be 50% more people are now coming to the site because of Maps. Now will they buy anything? Now will they become subscribers? If they do, then maybe Maps will remain free. And if it doesn't lead to any increased revenue, then maybe it's, we tried that for a year. Now we'll go back to, you have to be a subscriber in some way in order to host a Maps game. And, no, as the conspiracy theorist, if it doesn't work, no great loss, at least revenue-wise and gameplay-wise.
It's a challenging situation, because I think Maps' closest comparable is Owlbear Rodeo, which, to the best of my knowledge, remains free to use. If you start making Maps cost money to use, and all of a sudden you're letting some third-party virtual tabletop eat your lunch.
But weren't they already eating their lunch?
Yeah, right. Go back to eating your lunch.
I think what Owlbear Rodeo kind of captured, who, for the record, I learned this recently at PAX Australia. They're Australian, Owlbear Rodeo, the developers of it. So, and they are delightful. Yes, they are. I didn't know that either. But yeah, shout out to them. Is the simplicity, is the fact that like you're playing a tabletop role-playing game. You're not trying to play a video game. And obviously people have their preferences along that, scale, if you want to call it that, between using really sophisticated virtual tabletops, something like a Fantasy Grounds or a Foundry, versus something incredibly simple like Maps or Owlbear Rodeo, where it's just exactly what it is. It's a virtual tabletop. You throw out pieces and you play, and it makes it very easy. And I think that's what Maps has kind of really captured. And I think that the criticisms that we started to hear about Owlbear Rodeo maybe a year ago was they started to overcomplicate it. They started to try to add too much to it. It lost the simplicity that people loved about it. And I think there could be a danger there with D&D Beyond Maps as well, of them trying to, if they turn that into the focus, how can we bolt things onto it to try to make it the most whiz-bang thing we can? We shall see. But overall, good news for Wizards of the Coast from Hasbro. Wizards of the Coast's earnings, I think, were up by something like 33% quarter three on quarter three 2023. Most of that is attributed to Magic the Gathering, but not all of it, with D&D getting a good shout out, which is good, which is positive for the hobby. And speaking of positive things, we have emails, and they have come in from, James, where have the emails come in from?
That would be podcast@ghostfiregaming.com, of course.
Quick on it. Podcast
I don't believe it.
ghostfiregaming.com.
Go prove Shawn wrong by emailing podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
There you go. You go.
You will be opening up your computer to all sorts of stuff if you do that. Do not do it, folks.
And what's more terrifying than the God of War? Because we have an email from Tia, and Tia is asking about starting levels. It's become the norm to start a D&D campaign at level 3 to 5 if it's not your first campaign, skipping the squishy and less dynamic levels of 1 and 2. Does it become important to start campaigns at level 1 if you're introducing new rules or systems like the Grievous Wound mechanics or Shadowsteel Curses from Grimhollow, or a new way of setting up your character's species using the Grimhollow or the Ethereal Expanse heritage system? Even though you have to go back to when characters are most vulnerable, it gives players a chance to kind of adjust to those new systems.
My gut instinct is no. I think if your group is one that likes to start at level 3, then you should keep starting at level 3, because they've got enough mechanical sophistication to be starting there anyway. But that's just my gut instinct. I'm curious to hear what everyone else thinks.
I mean, look, my homebrew version of Grievous Wounds, I'm pretty sure starts at level 3. Like, I think I wrote that in the version that I released to the public, where I was like, this only comes into play at level 3. So, and I'm also the kind of person who I've started campaigns at level 6. I can't be stopped. So I don't know. It's
what needs do you have as the game master? What needs do your players have? What desires do you have? The only warning I will give you is we as creative game designy folks tend to think, oh, well, let me do this and this will be great, without thinking through the ramifications of doing that. And the ramifications in this point might be not that the players don't know what they're doing, if you have experienced players and you're an experienced game master, but the stories that you could tell at those levels are lost to you if you start at 3rd level, at 5th level. If you start with the characters being able to cast Raise Dead or Revivify, what does that do to the stories that you want to tell? And one of the criticisms I've seen of various editions of D&D or any of its clones is that the players or the characters feel like superheroes. It doesn't feel like they're coming from that, Luke Skywalker, Bilbo Baggins sort of, you're just this farmer / hobbit who is sitting there and then gets thrust into an adventure and need to grow. And so if you do that, you are losing that bit of story.
And yeah, I think it is worthwhile to really sit down and think about what kind of story you want to tell. You know what I mean? It's like when MCDM decided we're just going to give you a bunch of stuff at level 1, part of that was, well, I guess the stories we're telling don't involve the farmer who gets thrust into it. You are already a hero when you begin. And so that affects the kind of stories that you tell. You know, are you going to be more focused on the group dynamics? And so it's more of a getting the band back together kind of, you know, it changes from campaign to campaign, not even just from group to group. I think another thing that's worth considering is how much do you or your players cope with the frustration of not understanding mechanics in the moment as you're playing. Because if you're fine to stand at the table and go, wait, how does this work? And have a 5-minute conversation about, you know, how does this new thing function with the game and the way that we play? And someone go read the rules. What does it say? You know, if you're fine with that and it slowing down the rate of play and getting in the way in the meta conversation over top of the game, then chuck it in at whatever level. It doesn't really matter. But if you have a group of players who that will really ruin it for them and pull them out of the story and really, really make the night less fun, then maybe do consider starting at a lower level where it's not going to be as complicated.
This question got me thinking about another thing as well that I had been pondering. Again, it was kind of like the question last week that came in via my wife about interactive narratives versus shared storytelling, of like something that I had been pondering upon, but I hadn't had the vocabulary for. And then this question kind of clicked it into place for me because what is the purpose of levels 1 and 2 in the 5th edition system specifically? Because people complain, oh, it's so squishy. Why do you bother starting at those levels? I've played a campaign. Why would I do that? And then I've played a couple games like Draw Steel and particularly DC 20 as well that feel like they need to solve level 1, right? They're too squishy. It's not fun playing at level 1. So let's solve it by giving you a whole bunch of more stuff. And I found both those games hard to access as a new player who doesn't understand those systems because I'm looking at my character sheet and I'm like, I've got so much crap I can do here. I don't know what I'm meant to be doing. I don't know how these rules interact. I don't know, like I have 20 spells and I'm level 1 in this, you know, not literally 20, but I might have like 9 or 12 spells at level 1 and I don't know why I would cast one and not the other. Why would I make an attack roll instead of casting a spell? Why would I use this ability and not that one? Even keeping all of that stuff in my head. And it made me think, okay, so maybe the purpose of level 1 and 2 really in D&D 5th edition is that they really are the tutorial levels. They are the levels where you learn to make an attack roll. They are the levels where you learn what a spell and a spell slot are. They are the levels where you learn what an action and a bonus action is without having already 12 options or even 5 options of all the different things that you can do, creating overwhelm. And then once you're experienced in the system, you never need to start at level 1 again if you don't want to, because they're the tutorial. You can skip the tutorial as video games kind of give you the option to do.
Not all video games.
No, not all video games, yeah. But I feel like it was a bit of a misstep because I definitely heard this, maybe not from the creators themselves, but in the communities of like, why do we need to solve level 1? And I'm like, I think in reflection on this question, trying to solve the lack of fun perceived around level 1 in 5e is a bit of a misstep because it skips the tutorial for how you learn the very basics of the system.
I think it's difficult in both directions, right? Because ultimately, if a new player, because if we're talking about it as a tutorial, we're talking about a new player coming to the table starting at level 1, right? They're not used to these things. What they want is to be able to do the thing in their head in the game. Because that's the selling point of an RPG, right? Otherwise, why not just play a board game? Why not just, so they want to be able to do the cool thing from their head at the table. And there's kind of a really tricky balance to be had there where if you give them everything they need to do everything they could possibly think of, then that's going to be really difficult for them to sort of grasp and tackle those mechanics. But if you make it simple for them to tackle, they're probably not going to have the groundwork done to do all of those cool things. If you give them everything they want to be a really cool, gritty, dark, gloomy assassin, they're going to either not be able to be the badass who does a backflip and throws 3 knives into people's necks and then disappears into the shadows. Or they are going to be able to do those things, but it's going to be a lot for them to take in all at once. And I don't know that I've seen any game completely nail it, but I think it is a valiant endeavor in either direction.
One thing that I've learned about about player psychology is that there's a sweet spot between overwhelm and boredom that is the ideal point for learning, right? And unfortunately, that sweet spot is different for everyone because it's based on kind of where all of these intangible given circumstances have led them to in their game playing life. So someone coming to D&D at a certain point, they played a lot of RPGs, they played a lot of Skyrim, and they've really gotten into it. There's a certain point at which their mechanical understanding is just such
Skyrim,
that,
by the way, being a game that doesn't let you skip the tutorial without mods. Go on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So coming to D&D, and they can very easily learn what's going on at first level. And so the first time they play a first level character, they're like, oh, yeah, I get it. Okay, let's keep going. But then the third time they play a first level character, like, get me the hell out of here.
Yeah.
But then, there's, my mom who's never played D&D before, who would probably be lost even if she played a first level character 5 times. Yeah. There's just a different level of given circumstances for these people. And I think D&D in that way, giving people the power to start kind of wherever they want to, and first and third are kind of good natural breakpoints, is probably the best thing they could be doing.
Yeah, knowing your audience for your specific game is huge. And I think Draw Steel, they know that their audience is not going to be people walking in off the street to try a game. Their audience is people who have played various editions of D&D and other games. So I was in the same situation as you, Ben. I sat down to play Draw Steel, and I got my character about an hour before the game. And this was Road to Broadhurst. So it was set up so you're only supposed to use these powers in the first encounter, these in second. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm not even going to look at these other pages. And then the game master started playing, and everyone else was using all their powers.
Right.
And I'm panicking. I'm freaking out. So now I'm going through 3 sheets, somebody who's designed games, who's played countless games, like trying to figure out what's what. And I got there. It took me an hour, and I sort of missed the story because I was focused on my sheet. But I didn't give up because I knew what I was doing. D&D doesn't have that luxury. D&D has to be ready to cater to anyone who wants to play. And that's why, for me, first level D&D is still too complicated.
Sure.
Because I want the stories that are told to be meaningful at every level, but I also want the players, no matter their experience, to be able to sit down and enjoy the experience without having to stare at their sheet constantly. And so that's why we get things like the beginner set. That's why we get introductory adventures through D&D Beyond or other ways, because those are all necessary in this journey that new players have to take.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's why a lot of adventure modules from 5th edition kind of do set out the first few levels as almost like a separate part of the adventure, an optional part, whether you want to start at level 1 and go through the first few levels, and then the real adventure kind of kicks in around levels 3 and 5. And it's kind of like, well, if you guys know the system, if you don't need the tutorial, skip that early stuff. If you want the story, maybe play it. But, I don't know. I feel like people seem to get frustrated at like, why are these levels even here if they're not fun to play anymore? Or why would they start the adventure at level 1 if that's where the story starts and then tell us to start at level 3? And it's like, well, it's intended to be customizable for your experience.
One of the simplest solutions is just make those early levels very, very short. You play for 3 hours. Now go to level 2, play another 3 hours. Now go to level 3 as an experienced player. Boom, you're level 3 after a 4-hour session, but you've got the story. You've got to meet the other characters. You've got to have that interaction, and you're good. And for inexperienced players, you get the You can slow that down. You can teach the game. You can still do the role playing and those other things that hopefully will draw the players into it without worrying about the mechanics and having them want to tell these stories with these other characters.
And boy, does the dopamine hit of leveling up twice in quick succession feel good.
Well, I think of the dopamine of like leveling up in a video game, right? I compare this question got me thinking about very specifically kind of like the God of War, the 2018 one in particular being the first in the series, but even Ghosts of Yote, which I'm playing more recently. What these games tend to do is you start the game and the first thing these combat style games teach you to do is attack and block. And that's kind of the only two things you can really do for the first few hours of playing the game is you can hit X a bunch of times to attack and you can hit B or whatever it is, trigger to block. And that's engaging combat up to a point, but then you need to start leveling up and unlocking things. And then the combat gets more dynamic as the enemies get more dynamic, but you have more options. And so you're not overwhelmed by like, wait, what does this weapon do? Why would I use this one? What buttons do I have to press to do this specific thing again? I can't remember because, I'm trying to learn just the basics. And it feels like that's what levels 1 of D&D is learning to block. And I think that like your experience with Draw Steel, Shawn, because I had a very similar experience with DC 20 where I had my species traits, but they were split across different sheets, and I had spells from different schools, so they were split into different sheets, and I had class abilities that were also split, and I had all these different currencies that I could spend mana to do this and action points to do that, but also stamina and this and that. And it was like every time I learn a new game, especially if it's a new system, personally, bring me back. How do I attack and how do I block? Just teach me that first in the first combat encounter, right? Instead of trying to layer on the fun in a fountain on top of me.
But these games have different priorities, you see, right? Their priority is to show you what cool things you can do that D&D can't. And so they have an incentive to you as a new player to really lay it on thick at the very beginning. Is that misguided? Maybe.
I mean, it's interesting though, because like with Draw Steel specifically, of course, if you just jump in with your player character, you've got a million things that you can do. And if you're using, like the Forged Steel sheet, hey, Andy, if you're watching this right now, love your work. Can we please put like a toggle on whether the character sheet includes every possible maneuver that every single character has? Because it's difficult to navigate right now. But love your work. But then you've got, of course, the starter adventure, the Delian Tomb, which, as Shawn was saying, sort of these starter adventures are designed to drip feed these abilities, so you do not get every ability that a level 1 character has at level 1. It's more like you're starting at level 0 and gaining those level 1 abilities. But it's interesting to see the difference between those two things. Like it clearly is a game designed for, what's the phrase I've heard Colville use? Something like your first, second TTRPG. You know what I mean? It's not meant to be your first go at a TTRPG. It's meant to be your first go at something that isn't D&D in terms of the way it's been designed. But then the starter adventure being designed to specifically drip feed that stuff. I do also think it's interesting because what you said about the joy of leveling up twice in quick succession. Very specifically, when I'm running D&D, I use milestone leveling, but I don't do it based on like narrative dot points so much as when have I seen every one of these players use their new character ability at least once, sort of organically, right? And so I'll have players saying, well, why haven't we leveled up? It's been ages. I'm like, it's because you haven't used Bardic Inspiration.
That's okay.
It's on you.
Let's jump topic a little bit because I thematically linked these emails. This next one is from Kreger, who has emailed podcast@ghostfiregaming.com asking about narrative leveling up. Do you ever include a in-world explanation for how your player characters all suddenly gain extraordinary new abilities when they level up, especially relevant at level 3 when everybody unlocks their subclass in 5e? But a lot of systems that have that discrete leveling, how does the Eldritch Knight suddenly know magic? Or is it something that you kind of try to bake into the backstory of either the campaign or your characters that branched for me into thinking about like systems of leveling up, because not every system has the discrete, you suddenly gain a bunch of new stuff leveling. What if there was a milestone leveling where it was almost like unlocking achievements or trophies, whatever video game analogy you want to use, where it's like you get the next version of this ability once you have cast this ability an X number of times. So let's say the Eldritch Knight, you gain a new spell slot once you have cast a spell 10 times. Or you gain a new, your health increases once you have been below 10 HP 5 times, or something like that, you know? That requires a whole new system. We're not talking about 5e anymore, but that idea just fascinates me, Dael. That's a really interesting
fun,
idea,
isn't it? Because there are game systems that use those really, and they range a little bit. There are some that are far more on the narrative end. I love Marvel heroic role playing, and I'm sure other Cortex games probably also do this, where there's not really leveling, but there is character progression, and it happens based on, you know, narrative beats that match your character. If you're playing, you know, Beast from the X-Men, you have moments where your character progresses, but you have to choose between like, oh, you don't help the team in order to help give medical attention to this bystander, or alternatively, you progress by ignoring the bystander who needs medical attention and helping the team. Both of those progress your character, but in different directions. So there are these narrative beats. Or you've got, you know, slug blasters, where in order to level up your character over different points, or monster of the week, you know, these things happen or failures happen, and those narrative beats help to inform your character. But there are also systems where in order to level up your skills, you have to succeed a certain number of times and fail a certain number of times. And that's the only way to make your skill better, which that gets to serve the people who are a little bit more simulationist as well, because then it's like, yeah, of course, if you're really good at a thing, you're not going to get better at it unless you have used it a bunch of times. You need to fail a certain number of times, but if you're really good at it, that's going to take longer. And I just think that it's so fun. It's so flavorful. It's so freaking balanced.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Call of Cthulhu uses the basic role-playing game system, and it's this very similar thing. You know, certain successes or failures, and you can bump up the percentage of the skills that you have.
Right.
It's so complicated it almost goes back to the conversation we just had. How story focused do you want this to be, or how mechanical do you want this to be, sits at the root of this question. Because if you make someone wait for that dopamine hit of leveling to tell a story, you're going to lose half your players. Mm-hmm. If you just say, okay, level up, but someone says, well, but I want it. Now, quiet down. Go write a story about it. Everybody else wants to get on with the show here, right? So if you tie your mechanics to this narrative, you are segregating half of your audience based on those desires. So it's really tough to do so. Draw Steel does a good job of tying a narrative to the respite and to, you know, this idea of victories. And so they sort of split the difference there. But there has been a push in D&D in previous editions to not only when you level do you have to spend a lot of gold to find the proper training and to take the time to do it. We've talked about before, there are only certain number of high-level druids in the world. And so if you would become a level 13 druid, and there are already, we'll say 10 level 13 druids, there can only be 10 level 13 druids. So you have to hunt down one of the other level 13 druids and defeat them. Then you can take their place.
Only 13.
Exactly. And so, you know, that's the story-wise, that's cool. Role gameplay wise, it's like, okay, now we have to stop the story. We have to let Bob here go off and fight the druid while we sit around and twiddle our thumbs.
I think that's fun. I mean, one of my first D&D videos to get picked up by the algorithm and shared around was, of course, my terrible rules for earning an animal companion, which I don't think that I've barred leveling up behind narrative, storytelling, but I have made rules where it's like, if you want your animal companion feature, you got to go do this. If you want your wizard's familiar, you got to go do this. And I like it being like, today's episode is a spotlight on that character. But I fully understand that lots of people think that that's terrible.
I tried that because I have a YouTube video I want to make because I think it's a cool idea, which I'm calling the quest to level 3, which is especially relevant now that we've moved into 5e 2024, which is you run whilst everyone's at level 2. Every session is a spotlight on one character to go and do whatever the thing is they need to do to unlock their subclass. So the party don't all level up at once, but they all level up kind of one after the other across different sessions. If you're a paladin, maybe you have to go to a sacred grove or a church to take a vow. If you're a warlock, you have to go make your pact. If you're a fighter, maybe you have to go to a special training ground. If you're an assassin, maybe you have to go assassinate a target. And then once you've killed them, you unlock the assassin subclass. And it was, when I tried to run this, a disaster for kind of the reasons Shawn was alluding to before, which was the players moved through the sessions a little too slowly. I made the requirements a little too complex. So it wasn't taking one session to do this. It was taking multiple sessions focused on one character while everybody else is waiting to level up. And 2 months later, we've still got players on level 2 while half the party are on level 3. And I think there is a way to do it, but I feel like you have to go in from the start of your campaign with that as a goal, and you have to know what those one-shots are going to be, and you have to keep them
also,
to one-shots.
Are your players theater kids? Is probably a big element of it as well.
I wonder in this quest to level 3 idea, if there's a way to put all of the requirements in one dungeon. If all the players are going into the dungeon because their various orders or what have you have decided that there are things that are needed that are within there, or they all have a sort of common enemy that's within there, and it's not like all the orders want the same guy dead, because then it's just a normal D&D session. Then everyone levels up to level 3 at once and it makes sense. That's normal. But if, the paladin needs to recover the defiled idol from the castle's altar, and the monk needs to go, make a prayer at the sacred grove that is sort of hidden in the dungeon beneath, and yada, 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 then that could keep everyone feeling sort of unified, and every session you can get to somewhere without needing to introduce a new quest to a new area. And you got to do the obligatory travel montage, and they're already there. You can just kind of go to different parts of the dungeon.
Or if there's a way of making the individual goals still have a team effort journey to get to the goal, or
I think you've highlighted there though, James, the part of the issue is you really need, if you want to try this quest to level 3 leveling up idea, you really have to structure your campaign around it from the beginning, because of the exact thing you've highlighted. What if the story you're telling doesn't naturally lend itself to players going off and doing, random things as a group that are away from whatever the main narrative is?
Also, always a proponent of, hey, you're having a little solo adventure right now. Let's do some of it over chat. I'm a big fan.
Sure.
The Matt Colville style interlude.
Yeah. They get shot with 3 black arrows and now you're running from a beast in a horrible landscape. Yes. That old chestnut.
I will say this. I've somehow wound up playing a lot of classic World of Warcraft recently.
We noticed. Sorry, from your Discord. Dante and I were looking at it the other day. I was like, James has been playing World of Warcraft for 2.5 hours and they're on a 23-day streak? Wow. Anyway, not to call you out.
So I started smoking again. Yeah. No. And it's because I've found a regular group of players to play with, right?
Sure.
We've got our party. And I don't play D&D with them, but I do play this game with them. And I more or less only play with them. And because that game has a sort of old school feel to it. For example, there is a class trainer, and you do need to pay money to get your class abilities even after you level up. It's very old school D&D in that way. And there are some class quests that kind of require you and your band to divert from the optimal leveling path or whatever to go do something that really only benefits one member of your party. And it's it's not always equal. Priest players do not have class quests that require you to do that, but warriors do. And so the party has to kind of help you out. And I think in a video game where a play session can be sort of briskly done in about an hour, that works really well. It's just a lot harder to do it in D&D, where your sessions can be sprawling and pacing is really desperately important as a DMing skill.
I think to answer the question from Kregar more broadly around narrative leveling, I always kind of strive for it to bake the narrative into why the characters have leveled up and their backstory, and encourage the players to do so. But as Shawn has kind of touched on, I try to never let it get in the way of the pace of the game, and never stop the campaign to we've got to take a left turn over here, typically speaking, because as Shawn said, it can slow the pace, it can cause the other players to get bored at the table. And as I said on a previous episode, if you spotlight literally a single player for too long and everybody else is sitting there for 40 minutes not doing anything, not rolling a dice, not having a conversation, why did they show up to play D&D that night? It is always a group activity, even with a spotlight.
I mean, it could also just be as simple as, hey, this is the first time you've used that ability. Tell me what it looks like. What unlocked this for you? Yeah.
Well, speaking of unlocking things, we have unlocked the end of this episode. Ooh, spooky for some reason. Don't forget, next week we are going to be recording at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Nope, that's not right. Let me go that again. Next week we will be here at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time if you want to catch us live on Twitch on the Monday. That is Tuesday, 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Time, because time zones are scary. Or you can catch us on YouTube, likes, thumbs, stars. They will grow our eldritch power to even greater heights. I've been Ben Byrne. I am here with James Hake, suddenly, Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill, and we will be back next week for another episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. Ba-da-da, ba-da-da. Ba-da-da-ba.
I'm trying to do like a Halloween version. This is what Halloween sounds like, right?
Yeah, no, this is successful. Yeah, I'm so scared.
I knew it was, but it's good to have it confirmed.
Yeah.
It's like I'm there at Halloween right now.